One more thing.
One more thing. One more thing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of One More Thing, these deep and meaningful interviews. And today I am in esteemed company. I'm with a blues man, a jazz man, a soul man, a veteran, a political man, a northern man, and a drum and bass man. That's all one person. It's not a great group of men. He's Pat Fulgoni. How you doing, man?
Oh, thank you, man. That was quite a good introduction.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for the interest in interviewing me. That's
I've been interested in interviewing you for a really, really long time because I think you can tell a fascinating musical story, really. You can join the dots through the last 30 years and everything that kind of, came before and put us on this path musically. You've been on a musical odyssey throughout your entire adult life, haven't you?
Yeah, I've kind of I've hoarded myself around a few genres. I've had a few roles in the music biz along the way, and but I'm still here. I'm still got a lot of balls up in the air, hoping that something will happen.
Yeah.
Funny old
Well, it does always seem like they are happening as well. There's just so much stuff. I imagine a week for you, whether you're doing the blues experience or whether you're doing drum and bass and things like that. Like, no week is the same for you, is it?
Very true. I mean, things have got a bit weird since lockdown. Obviously, opportunities are kind of, you've got to grab them while they're there. Yeah, tonight I'm putting on I'm starting a blues night actually at a local venue in Huddersfield.
Wow.
I've got my head full of that. And when I say blues, I mean like real blues bands, and tonight's band is the Dana Ali band. She's like a US singer. And she's got like a local band from Huddersfield, my hometown, and she's kicking off the Huddersfield Blues Club, and we aim to do it every month and just kind of stimulate the interest in old school blues music.
Wow, brilliant. So that's actually happening in real time now. You're launching a brand new blues night tonight.
Yeah,
wow.
I mean, it's a small thing, but, blues is quite a popular genre around here. So, as with the kids and also, the old miserable farts as well. So, we hope to get an eclectic audience. I've not put off the old miserable farts by saying that, myself included.
Brilliant. I mean, blues is where everything started, like musically. Let's take it back way before the start of your career or before you were born or anything. Everything comes from the blues as we know it in modern day music of black origin, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does, and I mean, obviously, it's a genre which has been pretty much whitewashed over the last few decades. But it's but it is. We should admit that it's the roots of all popular music.
Yeah.
But recently, because there's been a bit of interest in me doing blues live, I've kind of got a new band together called the Pat Fulgoni Blues Experience, and we launched it just as lockdown was happening, of course, and we had to cancel a load of European dates, but yeah, we've got a few gigs coming up with that, and it keeps me singing. I was always listening to kind of guitar bluesy kind of music at college and stuff like that. So in a sense, I'm having a midlife crisis going back to where it all started for me.
Brilliant.
I like Jimi Hendrix, to be honest. Not just as a guitarist, but as a singer. And, I've always loved some of the blues greats like Muddy Waters, and I'm a big Stevie Ray Vaughan fan. And it's just great to have a band that I can earn some money from and perform, and, keep it in my head,
Brilliant. In terms of the whitewashing, how do you pay homage and make sure people know that you're singing the real blues and you're paying respect and keeping the tradition going, really, and not whitewashing it, not, kind of, how do you pay homage in that type of way?
It does sound a bit hardline when I come straight in with the word whitewash, but, it's
true. It's absolutely true.
And in a sense, that is similar to drum and bass, really. I mean, when I first got into drum and bass, for example, it was, I'd heard Ronnie Size, New Forms, and I'd heard Gold is Timeless album, and it completely blew my mind. But if we're going to be honest about it, it's quite a different scene these days, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's a similar cycle, really, and I guess it's happened to hip hop, jazz, you know, this is all kind of music that I really like, you know. In my blues set at the moment, I'm covering greats like Ray Charles and, you know, Muddy Waters and Buddy Guy, and, you know, and I mean, you know, it is what it is, you know. I'm hoping I'm turning more people onto the blues.
Yeah, definitely. And are you doing it the other way around as well? Are you turning your blues people onto drum and bass? So I've seen photos of you with your blues experience band, and they don't look like, none of you look like drum and bass. You know, like you wouldn't, if you pass somebody on the street, no one would think you're a drum and bass man unless they knew, you know, who
Well,
you
there
were.
is that, isn't there? Yeah, there's always been an image issue. I guess it was quite funny last year. I managed to take the Pat Fulgoni Blues Experience to a blues festival in the Czech Republic, which is a country where I've done a lot of blues. And we turned up to this festival, and this guy came over to me and went, "Your electronic music is bullshit." And I was like, "Oh fuck, here comes the meat cleaver." and then he went, "But I like your blues." And I went, "Oh, thank God for that." And then he went, "And here's my son. He likes your electronic music, but he doesn't like the blues." So I had dad and son watching my blues set, you know, and it can be like that sometimes. I often try and turn blues purists onto drum and bass and vice versa. But it is a different scene, and you would be surprised about my blues band. You know, this summer we've played a number of festivals which have got a bit of a dance vibe to them, like Beat Herder, you know, Soul Fest.
Brilliant, brilliant. But the dots are all there to join, and the dots aren't as far apart as people think, really. And I think, you know, your musical journey is proof of that, really, that everything is really, really closely related, really, down to the sample culture, down to blues being the roots of things. But you just only have to sidestep from one genre, like one step, and you're in another world, really. Everything is related, isn't it?
It totally is. And I mean, I guess it's one of the things that some of the producers in drum and bass, like Murdock, has flagged this up. And also, I've actually pulled out a few vinyl here. This is an interesting album that I'm on. I'm drying these albums out, actually, because I am definitely living a blues lyric the last month, because next door's house has been sending water my way. There's been a minor flood, and all my vinyl got a bit knackered, and I'm like, "Oh, come on, man." But anyway, that aside, I'm singing on the single on this Technimatic track called "Sometimes," which came out on Shogun Audio, and that's definitely a blues vocal. You know, and it really works sometimes with liquid. Not all the time, but, you know, it's nice to get that crossover from time to time. And in bands that I've been in the past that might have been a bit more electronic, I've always known that I'm a blues singer. You know, I mean, that's kind of where I come from. With a bit of jazz and a bit of soul. You know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can hear all of that really in your delivery, whatever genre you kind of work on there, really. I mean, how about, like, you know, the bands that you're with now? Do you play kind of drum and bass on the tour bus or in the car on the way to gigs? Do they get it at all, or do they just
totally. Like some of the lads in the Pat Fulgoni Blues Experience, and that the age range is quite large in that band. You know, some of them like DJ house music. You know,
wow, cool.
Happen to be in a blues band as well, and it seems to be more acceptable these days. Whereas you know, a few years ago, you know, I'm blues and that's it. Go, cheer up, man. Some of this 174 BPM. It didn't always work, but I'm finding it's a lot more open these days, you know. So similarly, well, Sam is on keyboards. He's played an awful lot of free parties in his life, you know. And Zebedee is on drums, and you know, he's been known to play live percussion at raves and stuff like that, you know. So it does come into the conversation quite a bit, does drum and bass.
Cool. And electronic music in general has really always come into the conversation for you, really, hasn't it? I mean, going back to Carver was the first kind of real big musical triumph that you had, wasn't it?
Yeah, I spent a lot of years kind of running this band called Carver that was completely unmanageable. We were probably at odds with the music industry, you know. Every time we got opportunities, we'd spectacularly blow them, you know. But We did
in a kind of Spinal Tap style.
There was an element of that, definitely. The band originally was like a four-piece. It formed in the 90s. It was a psychedelic kind of krautrock influenced band. We just did what we did with a jazz drummer, psychedelic guitarist. I was just kind of doing whatever I was doing. You know, it's quite an exciting project, and quite unusually for Huddersfield, we managed to get some showcases, and we got signed off the back of a gig at the Marquee Club in London around the time that I started listening to all kinds of genres of music, including drum and bass. You know, we kind of got into sample culture, and we had an Akai sampler, you know, to use, and we started putting beats into Carver and expanded it into this like 7-piece with a horn section and everything. And I then ended up releasing that music on my own label, Chocolate Fireguard.
Right, cool. That kind of culminated with the album Maui, didn't it? And I've been through loads of Carver stuff, and it's like the kind of you've accidentally mapped the music that I was into in that 10 years. Like in '93 when you released the first album, there's a real grungy kind of feel to it, which was definitely a big sound for me growing up as a teenager at the time. And then by the end of the trip, you sound like Low Fidelity All Stars or Black Grape, and you know those kind of that Happy Mondays kind of vibe. And that kind of sums up the '90s for anyone, unless you were a pure thoroughbred raver. These influences came in and out of the melting pot. All of the lines started to get blurred, and I think the Carver musical development or story narrative, if you like, tells that time in music, really, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. And then we went from playing kind of, you know, rainy Welsh festivals with like a lot of bands that were a bit more folky and psychedelic to then kind of playing the dance stage at Glastonbury. And it was the same band, you know, we just happened to kind of embrace dance culture.
Wow, brilliant. You must have some really funny stories then, if you were quite a mishap band, if you like, really, or chaotic band. Give us some funny tour stories.
So yeah, we've had some pretty crazy stories, you know, playing in front of large crowds, and you know, missing guitarists falling off the stage because they've been too wasted. That kind of
brilliant.
Very rock and roll, Carver. I'm too old for that approach these days, I'm afraid.
Brilliant. But I mean, in terms of kind of being on the road and stuff, you've recently been representing live musicians as far as the House of Lords, haven't you? So in terms of just like the kind of touring conversation, tell me about Carry On Touring and that campaign that you're
yeah. I mean, I get pulled into the bigger picture from time to time. I guess a couple of years ago, I ended up filling in a gap at events like South by Southwest in America, which was putting on these showcases for British music. And I made the case for and delivered this thing called the Yorkshire Showcase at this venue called the British Music Embassy. And that was all mainly about guitar bands, to be honest, because at that time, those kind of artists were wanting to play South by Southwest. And off the back of that work, I do get pulled into the bigger picture. So I'm an ambassador for Carry On Touring, which is a pressure group set up by my good friend, Mr. Brennan, Tim Brennan, who's an esteemed lighting guy for people like Lady Gaga and all kinds of huge artists.
Oh, wow.
And he set up a petition to essentially fix this whole problem of touring in the EU post Brexit. I mean, we've had a bit of a tough time as an industry, haven't we? From lockdown by stealth in some cases. Like nightclubs have had a really bad time, and artists have been out of work, and then Brexit happened, and you suddenly need 27 different scenarios for visas, which for live bands and bands that employ, you know, heavy logistics like, you know, roadies and, you know, PA gear and all this, it's an utter nightmare. So bless Tim Brennan for setting that up. It was a really, really good campaign. You know, hundreds of thousands of people have signed his petition, and we were invited down to the House of Lords to basically tell a cross-party group just how bad it was and how in danger the music industry is. So I was happy to involve myself in that. I mean, I took a while to get into the House of Lords. They seemed quite interested in what was in my bag. But once we got past that little hurdle, I was able to say my bit, and I said, I used to do lots of touring with bands, and it's pretty hard now to get into Europe, almost impossible.
So firstly, explain explicitly how bad it is, because I mean, I think it's a bit different with electronic music acts at the moment. DJs can still kind of jump on a plane with their USBs, and it's an individual or a duo at best, maybe a tour manager. With a band, especially on the level that you're talking about there, you've got groups of 20, 30 people sometimes with headline acts and stuff. So how grave is this situation, really?
Well, it's almost impossible to tour in Europe with the big bands unless you've got lots of money behind you and you can circumnavigate the need for all these carnets, all these different visas. I mean, I do remember getting into the States and the whole faff of like getting my band Carver into the States, with visa applications. I mean, that cost an awful lot of money, and it's a similar kind of scenario to untangle this mesh in Europe. And one of the things I learned at the House of Lords is that traditionally, a lot of American bands have been coming over to England to start their European tours. And at that point, they hire British firms to drive them, to do the sound for them and all this. That is disappearing now because the company, it's taking out huge, positions. And ultimately, if you think that the industry used to be the third largest export coming out of this country, it's not anymore. And if you're going to take away touring revenue, it's really damaging. And what I'm detecting is a lot of the youth are just thinking it's a pipe dream. If you're in bands, that is, they're just thinking, well, I'm never going to get to tour Europe now. It's just too complicated. But I mean, that was an essential part of my development, getting in a van with Carver, driving to Holland, driving to Belgium, dare I say it, probably health and safety would be interested in how we were doing that. But, we would get to those gigs and we would perform those gigs and we would hone our craft and we would earn money from it. And we'd come back and we'd be more confident, and that is all being lost right now.
Oh man, that is the wider picture, isn't it? The infrastructure, the people there and the experiences, and also then with bands where if they know that there's no hope or if they feel that there's no hope, that has a psychological effect on creativity and aspirations, and energy is a collective force, doesn't it, really? This is the wider picture.
It really is. And I mean, actually today, I mean, I told you I was preparing for a blues gig. I'm also trying to get some projects off the ground that work specifically with the youth. I mean, unfortunately in Huddersfield, we've had some kid was stabbed to death outside the local school recently.
Oh man,
this isn't actually unusual. And similar, often certain genres of music are being demonized, particularly genres like drill. And what I'm really interested in trying to lever are some projects locally to me. I mean, obviously it'll get me some work, so I do have a bit of an agenda there as well, but some projects that will do some good and will help, help develop the next generation's music, whatever they're into.
Yeah, empower people and give them a chance and things like that, really.
I totally hear you. And that's something that came up at the House of Lords recently. I think there was some really, really good speakers. Like there was Perry from Pendulum, who's the Pendulum's guitarist. He read out Barney's letter. I don't know if you've seen the drummer Barney's letter that's been going around the internet.
No.
He's
Tell me about
it. How he lost his role as Anastasia's drummer because he ran out of time. He was only given something like 90 or 180 days. I forget which it was. And now they've started working with a drummer from somewhere else, from Europe, because it's easier. And he's just lost his position of 10 years.
10 years as well. Wow. That's the reality. So what was the reception like? Did you come across, because I mean, we've now reached the point where just politicians have just become completely untrustable. And one of the, the only few that are trustworthy are they're in a small minority or appear trustworthy.
Yeah.
But how were you received when you put forward all of this? Were there reasonable people listening to you? Because at this stage, I kind of get the idea that just politicians are just like, no, not listening, and looking at their bank account on the phone. And they're not listening. Nobody cares about the future of this country and the next generation, or arts or culture or anything. Please put me out my misery there and tell me it wasn't quite as bad as that.
There's a couple of MPs that are interested, people like Kevin Brennan, who's not actually related to Tim Brennan, who founded the campaign. He seems to be very involved, and I think people are starting to realise just how knackered the creative industries as a whole are. Particularly, when we've got a government that's going on about growth. Well, what about the creative industries? You're annihilating them right now.
Yeah.
But the reception was good, and everything that we said has got fed back, and there's been a number of follow-up kind of studies and articles saying the New Musical Express and magazines like that. And it's about pressure. You've got to keep the pressure up.
Yeah.
A number of organizations that are doing really good work, like the Music Venue Trust, for example. I'm really impressed by them. They're going around trying to sort out the venues, because so many of them are folding right now, and that's at home. That's not international touring.
Yeah. So even domestically, because of the cost of fuel and stuff like that, I would imagine it's a nightclub's electricity bill. It isn't going to be, that's going to be affected hugely, isn't it?
Absolutely. And all these property developers are circling, going, oh, another club's about to disappear. Let's build some more flats in that. It's an attack on culture.
It really is. It really is. I mean, politics plays a huge role in your output anyway, certainly online. I agree with everything that you post, really. It's really important to be disengaged, isn't it? And you spend a lot of time politically activated, I believe.
Yeah, sometimes, when I can. I mean, it doesn't pay the bills, that kind of work, does it? You kind of get dragged in. I mean, I guess my activism started in the 90s. We keep going back to the 90s, don't we?
Yeah.
And I put together a compilation CD of bands that were against the introduction of tuition fees. Because if you wanted to go to university back then, or polytechnic, you get a grant. If you couldn't afford it, you get a grant. But now you're saddled with like $9,000 a year debt, aren't you, in tuition fees? But anyway, we saw that coming, and we had this campaign called the Campaign for Free Education, with the backing of MPs like Tony Benn, who was a bit of a hero of mine.
Yeah.
He really was a principled MP, and I actually did a track with him for that compilation. That was completely surreal.
Whoa! You did a track with Tony Benn?
Yeah. We did. Yeah. Well, it started out as an a cappella, because we were just going to include him on the end, and I was in this kind of ambient band, and some music was knocked up to put in the background. It was too hard not to go for that, really. Had to be done. but bands that were on the CD were bands at the time like Dread Zone, Zion Train, who I'd worked with.
Yeah.
Loads of kind of big bands, Suede. They were all in support of this campaign, and that kind of got me into activism and the bigger picture. And I realized there's certain things that you need to fight for. Like I've been actively involved in campaigning against the closure of our local A&E in Huddersfield. You've got to fight for these things every once in a while.
Yeah. Because if you don't, then it will just be taken away from you, really. And I think it feels like hope is just being drained. So people almost feel disengaged to the point where, what's the point in fighting? What's the point in voting? And I think there's a real point. Even now is more important than perhaps it has been maybe since like the poll tax days.
Yeah, we're back to those times, definitely. Perhaps worse.
Yeah,
I personally think this lot are worse than anything that's come before. These are really, really dark times, and it's haves and have-nots all over again. And I generally worry about how culture is going back to the Victorian times, where you're only allowed to engage in it or be part of it if you're resourced, and everyone else can just sod off. That's what it feels like. Will there be another clash? Probably not. These are different times.
So tell us about Love Music, Hate Racism, because you're also involved in that as well, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I got back involved in it around the time that Joe Cox, a local MP, was unfortunately murdered in our neck of the woods, and a few of us decided to put some gigs on for Love Music, Hate Racism. They came to see me, and I thought that was a really good idea. And we put a number of gigs around the town centre, and the last one that I did had more of a dance element to it, and we put a number of kind of local DJs on, local dance acts, and we also brought up Chris in Perspective from the Black Junglist Alliance, had him do a fantastic set for us, and he was also a panelist. We had a panel with an author called Rick Blackman, and one of the organizers, Zach from Love Music, Hate Racism, who I've worked with for a number of years. And that was a really, really good night. So we had a panel and a club night, and that was all really exciting.
Oh, great.
We're still talking about that, dude. But yeah, I just like getting involved in that. I think I live in a very multicultural town, and I think it's important to kind of set our stall out, tolerance and when you started to get MPs murdered because of their beliefs about immigration and stuff like that, you can tell there's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, a huge problem.
It was good to. I ended up singing all night actually on Whitehall for Love Music, Hate Racism. So this was when Theresa May was in, and I dedicated it to Theresa down the mile.
Wow.
I was able to knock out some drum and bass from the Love Music, Hate Racism stage. That was really exciting.
Brilliant.
And then I think maybe a year after, I think the People's Assembly Against Austerity had listened to lots of nagging from people like myself about how they should try and involve drum and bass culture. And we had Shy Effects on Parliament Green doing a bit of a rave for about 10-15 minutes. And it was totally surreal. You had Shy Effects doing his thing, and you had like Big Ben in the background, and it was absolutely brilliant. And it made me think, there is potential for activism in drum and bass.
Definitely. This is a conversation I had with Icicle recently on the radio, really, that he was lamenting the fact that there isn't enough political drum and bass or political electronic music. And a lot of people do say, leave the politics out of it, it should all be about the music, but it can never just be about the music really in that way, can it?
No, I don't want to be a party pooper. I mean, I like a good party, but sometimes it's good to stand up for your beliefs, definitely. And drum and bass is a huge scene, and with that it has a lot of power. It can help shape the world to be better. That's my theory anyway.
Definitely. And now I want to know all about your drum and bass journey, really. Like most people watching this would have come in from drum and bass and they think like, well, you can actually talk about drum and bass at all? I think like your first single, actually before drum and bass, there was also a little dalliance as a house music artist as well, wasn't there? As Jesus Haystacks.
Oh yeah, Jesus Haystacks was like I went around telling people that he was from Brazil. The DJ magazine rang up, and I wasn't part of the house kind of scene particularly, but my voice lends itself quite well to house music. I'd done a track which was a Thin Lizzy cover. Thin Lizzy being like a 70s rock band who I was really, really into. It was like I did it with a friend called Zdeněk in the Czech Republic, and it became quite a large house tune, and I marketed it as Jesus Haystacks originally myself to get some attention, and I had DJ magazine ringing up, and they were going, "Who's Jesus Haystacks?" And I said, "Oh well, let me see, he's from Brazil." But it finally got signed to Subliminal Records, which was a label run by Eric Murillo. It the artist name was shortened to J Haystacks. But
Yeah.
I'm quite proud of that track. You know, it was like top of loads of charts. Like Morales had it as #1 in his chart, and Gatecrasher had it in their top 10 of the year and that kind of thing. And
I remember it. I was listening back to it earlier on, and I remember it because around about that time I was playing a lot of house music and breaks, and obviously, unfortunately, Murillo, his legacy is going in complete tatters, and you know.
Yes.
But Subliminal and all of the other artists on Subliminal shouldn't be tarnished with that, because it was a powerful, powerful movement. The last kind of really exciting US house movement to happen, really. And I remember in like kind of arenas in Greenfields and stuff, you couldn't get into the Subliminal tent. If you weren't in there by 2 PM, it was a 1 in, 1 out. It was a huge, and that was, you know, early 2000s. That was part of that huge movement. It was a massive sound.
Yeah, no, I feel really lucky to have been kind of, you know, involved in that. And I remember getting the call a couple of years after that track by Ralph Lawson.
Oh, right. Okay. 2020 sound system.
Yeah, it was 2020 sound system. And this was a strange one with a drum and bass link. Diane Charlemagne had done a version of Your Love, you know, the Frankie Knuckles tune. And like... but perhaps more in a Jamie Principle direction. And she didn't like her verses. And so I got this call saying, oh, yeah, you know, do you fancy singing some verses on Your Love? You know, Diane doesn't like her verses. And I'm going, sorry, can you run that by me again? Diane Charlemagne doesn't like her verses. How is that even possible that she's sung something which isn't? She wasn't, you know. And in the end, I did the verses to essentially a duet with Diane Charlemagne. It doesn't particularly sound like me, but I'm really proud of it, because obviously her vocals on the Goldie stuff turned me on to the entire genre. To be honest, I was like, from a singer's point of view, I was like,
wow.
Angel and, you know, Inner City Life. It was like, what is this music? I've got to know more about it.
Brilliant. And it was, I imagine then, as a singer, it was her voice then that really kind of pulled you into the music.
Yeah, one of the things, that, and then particularly New Forms. When I saw that, you know, when it went up for the Mercury Award, and I remember seeing it on telly and going, "Whoa, this is like, it's jazz, but there's like dogs barking in it, and ducks quacking. Oh, what's going on here? I need this." You know. And,
it's funny you should mention jazz, because the only time I ever met Diane was actually through Ralph Lawson. I was up in Leeds, and I was doing an on the road kind of feature with him. So I was with him for about a week or so.
Wow.
And so you had Howard Marks and Diane Charlemagne were both in the back room. And I was chatting away to them, and when I realized it was Diane then, and we were talking, and I, you know, kind of said, I gushed out like, oh man, you're a huge inspiration. I was talking about how her voice had switched me on to drum and bass and part of my musical discovery, and she was like, oh, it's just really just jazz scales. And she started doing the jazz scales with the vocals of Inner City Life. And I was like, wow. And then, having had a few drinks, I started to kind of do some scat and going bibbidi bop 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 bop. She wasn't impressed. So unfortunately, our conversation just ended, and I never got to kind of rectify it or bounce back in any type of way. So she went away thinking, dickhead. Luckily, my dialogue with Howard Marks was a little bit better, but we were taking the piss out of each other like drunk Welshmen basically tend to do. But it was a real kind of formative night. But it's interesting that link came about through Ralph as well, because she was on the 2020 Sound System album. She did quite a bit of work with them, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. And I had a similar feeling. I was kind of, I went to the launch of the album, I think, and you know, and again, it's not like I'm an integral part of that scene. You know, I've just done a vocal, and I introduced myself to her, and I went away thinking, oh my God, I've just been in the presence of royalty here. You know, did she think I'm a dickhead? You know, like, you know, I was talking too much, wasn't I? I chewed her ear off. Oh my God, I've blown it. Those kind of thoughts. But I met her years later at Hospitality Do, and she, you know, she was cool, so I didn't blow it. But yeah, I just think she's such a great, you know, looking back, you know, that, yeah, I'm with you on that.
Hugely. So speaking of Hospital, I think it was Hospital, like your introduction to actually working on drum and bass came about in a really, really strange way, didn't it? With Chris Goss from Hospital.
In terms of singing, Yes, I mean, prior to that, I'd co-written a drum and bass track for Emotive Records.
Oh wow, okay, like Botchet and Scarpa and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
because Carver, we kind of flirted with breaks because we were that kind of tempo. We weren't a break beat outfit, but breaks were in the pot.
Mm.
And I'd kind of got to know a few of the artists on Botchet and Scarpa, and one of them was called Acetate, who actually recorded drum and bass for Emotive Records, which was part of Martin Love's group of labels. And yeah, he'd come to see Carver a few times, and it's like, oh God, I've got to like try and do a track with you guys. So we got him round to the house that we all lived in. It was a bit like the Young Ones where we lived. No problem. Guessing which one I was. And like yeah, I played a big riff on me Juno 106, which I've still got, this fat Juno
Go
sound.
on.
And he was like, yeah, we'll get that on this track. And it came out on Emotive Records around about 2000. And John Peel played it. But it was years.
Brilliant.
It was years since. It was years after that there was a bit of a wait before I kind of got to sing on it. And that came about because I was in China in 2005 on a mission with loads of other music biz. You know, there was like a group of labels that were going out to China to try and unlock the market. And I managed to tag along to that. And along the way, I was kind of in this karaoke session, really pissed, with like Music Week magazine were there, and Safta, who managed Muse, and all kinds of folks were there. And Chris Goss was there from Hospital Records. And I mean, I was taking the piss. I was just like, you know, right, push on. I'll try that, you know, Wuthering Heights, you know. And but
Can you
thankfully,
hit those high notes on
no,
Wuthering
thankfully we ran out of time because I was absolutely bricking it. And I'm going to look like an even bigger dickhead that I've made myself out to be in this session. But I think I got to do Backstabbers by the Isley Brothers, which was, you know, it was the music biz. It seemed apt. And and I also got to sing Hit Me Baby One More Time by Britney Spears. And Chris was like, man, you can really sing though, can't you? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And he's going, no, I think you could probably nail a drum and bass tune. And I'm like, okay, well, I do really like drum and bass. And I had seen the live footage of London Electricity, which was this huge kind of 10-piece band. I'd seen some video of that, and I was like, oh my God, like, you know, I'm gonna check this out when I get back. And anyway, yeah, he didn't forget, and he rang me up, and he got me down for a session a couple of years later for Newtone's single, which was called Beliefs.
Yeah.
I vocalized that, and that was my first drum and bass vocal. So in a sense, I owe it to Britney Spears and the Isley Brothers. And then from then on, I did quite a few artists on Hospital. I sung for Logistics, a track called Transporter. I did a couple for Camo Krooked.
Yeah.
Turn Up the Music, which keeps getting relaunched.
Yeah. I think that's probably where most people will associate your voice for the first time, really. I think that was the first time. I imagine, I don't know how it felt for you, but the first time there was real impact, and people, you know, like, yeah, where that song is all about you. It's not about Camo Krooked. You know, that vocal is everything there, really.
Wow, thanks for saying that. No, it's very nice to hear. And
I mean that in all the greatest respect to Camo Krooked, Marcus and Riney as well. Like, I'm sure they would agree there. Like, without that, it's a lovely piece of electronic music. But the vocal is like, you know, I still remember I was sitting in this very room when I got sent the album, and I can remember thinking, Jesus Christ, you know, like there are particular tunes that you remember hearing for the first time, even when you've been in the music industry for, you know, many years. And that was one of those tunes, I think, just like, poor, you know, because I think at the time there was a lot of female vocals as well. Like, you know, I think when you think of vocalists in drum and bass, it tends to be kind of more on, you know, more female vocalists than male vocalists. So I think it really stood out in that way as well.
Awesome. I'm a real fan of the Polo and Bryson remix that came out like 2 years ago. So it was well timed with the lockdown and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, turn up the music. Come on. We just sat at our houses doing nothing, you know, it seemed to resonate. But and I did All Night as well after that, which was quite a big thing for Camo Krooked. It was really exciting for both of those tracks to end up on the Red Bull symphonic album and to hear them kind of with an orchestra. That completely blew my mind about 2 years
Did you
ago.
go and perform that as well then? Did you?
No, I'd love to. I really do enjoy singing drum and bass, but the idea of singing with an orchestra as well is something that's also on my to-do list. I mean, that was like an 80-piece Viennese orchestra. It sounded absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I love
Just to hear that must have been an incredible experience.
Yeah, so I think they were triggering samples of my vocals on there. But yeah, one day, come on, lads, I can rock out at one of your raves. And on Hospital as well, I did a couple of vocals for London Electricity. Obviously, he co-owns that label. I particularly like the Maybe I Was Wrong, which was off his Syncopated City album.
Yeah.
I like that track. That was really cool. A bit of an 80s influence to it. And then after that, I kind of drifted into other labels like Spearhead, Ram Records. I was really enjoyed working with the Teddy Killers because that was quite a bit more kind of full on.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed collaborating with Teddy Killers on Ram. Yeah, so I'm quite a few artists now. Viper Records that came up the other year with Dosser and Locust. I'm really proud of that track.
Yeah,
genuinely, I love singing on drum and bass. It's just and particularly live. I don't do too many gigs, and I'm up for it. If anyone's listening, I can sound decent out of a PA, even if
I've seen some footage. I was watching some footage from, I think it was one of our SS's dues recently, really, and I think it's great, and you can see you belting it out over drum and bass, and that looked amazing. Like,
yeah, big up to SS. I mean, previous to that, I've done a few gigs with like Vanguard Project at Ministry of Sound. That were absolutely brilliant. That was for Drum and Bass Arena. I think it was one of their parties. But recently, SS and another guy from Formation Records called Adam have put me on at a few dues. And that's been absolutely brilliant. I mean, I was sat there backstage in Leicester waiting to do a little set, a medley of all these tunes that I've been on over the years. And then there were people walking into that booth like LTJ Bookham, Fabio and Groove Rider, Bassline Smith, SS. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like, I got to like sing loads of these tunes with Adam on the decks. And it worked, it was really, really interesting to try it out.
Brilliant. So that's quite a new development then. Is it like a kind of medley then of Pat Fulgoni drum and bass bangers?
Yeah, I've done stuff with my own laptop occasionally. I know I'm not a DJ, but to be honest, I quite like singing over intros and outros, and I can line them all up in Ableton. But it gets more exciting when I'm with a DJ like Adam Promo from Formation Records. We've done sets, in Bristol and Leicester, and we also do sets quite a lot of the time at Boombox Circus in Leeds, which is one of my fave nights. So for that, please, and big up SS for showing the faith in me.
Go on, big up Leroy each and every time, really, and big up Murdock as well, because Come Together has been the latest massive track, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, I'm really impressed with that track. I mean, and I know that this week there's a mix that's coming out called the Back to 98 mix, which I think is my favorite mix, and that's finally landing on the Liquid City compilation. I think it's out this week, so I'm really happy with that.
Brilliant. That's out like as this is coming out like next week. So yeah, that'll be out now as people are watching this. And we keep like, you said it just now, we keep going back to the 90s.
Oh no, we do. It's a good time to look back at, and I'm kind of I'm hoping to kind of channel a bit more of that on drum and bass in the future. But I've had a few tracks out recently. There's some Vanguard Project remixes of two of my tunes, which have had a really good response. It's come out on Focus Records, which is a Dutch label, and they're two tunes, Beautiful You and Drifter, and they've been really well received. Again, I've had some fantastic reactions off the DJs, so I'm really happy about that. And those have been going in my set, and they've been working very well.
Brilliant, cool. I mean, how much of your life is taken up by drum and bass? Out of your musical life, really, is taken up by drum and bass. Would you say it's like 50% kind of drum and bass and 50% blues, or is it?
Really? I mean, blues has taken over a bit because I can earn money gigging and stuff like that, and that's become recently very important because times are hard across the industry, and I really enjoy being in a band and playing live. So I think the blues is starting to dominate it a bit recently because I've been offering the band out to festivals. But I'm still there with drum and bass. I really do want to do some more tracks, and I love singing it live. That's where I want to go with it, really.
Cool. Who would be your dream artist then to actually work with, who you've yet to work with? Because you've worked with so many different artists across the whole spectrum.
Yeah, no, that's a real tricky one. I'm guessing in drum and bass, I've always wanted to work with Goldie and Ronnie Size because going back to the 90s again, those two completely blew my mind. And I've always wanted to work with High Contrast, actually. He's one that's escaped. I mean, I did quite a few on Hospital Records. I know he's not Hospital anymore, but I've often felt that I could probably lend something to his production, and for sure.
Cool. What's coming up next from you, just across any type of music now? What's coming up? What can the world expect? Except for, besides a brand new blues night, which is happening tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I've been chipping away at an album's worth of electronica.
Cool.
But I just don't have the confidence. It's all me and Ableton, and I know I'm not a typical producer. I'm not that hands-on. But I have been chipping away at an album's worth of electronica, and I'm like that meme, that skeleton in front of the mixing desk. That's me. That is. I'll still be chipping away at this album in another 10 years' time, but two of the tracks have ended up being remixed by Vanguard Project, and they came out, and that's quite unusual in that the remixes have come out before the originals.
Oh, right. So this is Beautiful You and Drifter.
Yeah. So I kind of thought, oh well, I might as well, there's interest here. I'll put the remixes out. It's not going to kill me, is it? If anything, it'll strengthen it. So
I always find that interesting, like the intrigue of when a remix comes before the original. It's the music journalist nightmare, because it's like, where is the original? I must be missing something. I'm missing some vital information.
Together. To be honest, when you get a production back like Villains and BC's production on the Vanguard Project is pucker, it automatically makes me think, Pat, your mixes sound like shit. You can't follow that. So yeah, I need to sort myself out on that and finish this damn album. So that's a project that I might still be talking about in a couple of years. There is talk of doing a lot more live drum and bass. Again, SS has indicated he might have us on at a few events, so that would be more than welcome. And I'd probably be doing some stuff with Adam from Formation Records along those lines. And I mean, I want to record the blues again. I want to do a blues album because I've got this great lineup now, really accomplished musicians, and it's kind of re-educating me how to sing. I need to do stuff live in bands and in the studio with producers, because if I just did the work with the producers, I'd probably forget how to sing, to be honest. It's getting that vibe right, you know what I mean? I don't want to be totally isolated in the studio, so I want to kind of get a live blues album out again. I mean, I kind of put out digitally this old blues album that I had knocking about, and the response was really, really good, from all the blues press. They were like, wow, this is fab, you got to do more of this kind of stuff. So that's kicked me up the arse. So I need to fix that.
Amazing. Well, bring the worlds together. And it sounds like you kind of are. You are bringing the worlds together in a drum and blues album. That's the new genre, drum and blues.
Well, that would be interesting. There's a few people trying that. And to be honest, I did a gig recently with the guitarist in the blues band. And it was a benefit gig for a local food bank. And they wanted me to do some stuff, and I went, yeah, I'll do a bit of blues, just me and the guitarist, And then I said, well, hang on a minute, I've got my laptop with me. You stay there on stage, and I started putting a few of the instrumentals on of the drum and bass stuff, and he was soloing over the top of it, and it really did work.
Oh, cool. And then you were singing, you were doing your thing.
Yeah. So you know, I really do want to reinvestigate that. I'd quite like to do some live drum and bass, you know, with a band. I mean, I remember seeing Breakbeat Era. That blew my mind. This guy. We've already talked about how cool London Electricity's band was.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, like, you know, we've spoken about some really negative stuff really about the UK, but I mean, could this be a silver lining of the situation, that we are supporting local artists and that more local scenes kind of come about in this type of way, and local fusion and stuff like that, instead of kind of bringing in headliners from elsewhere? That we look on our doorsteps and create solutions like that and kind of have more, you know, could this be a very small silver lining of a very dark cloud? Could stuff like that be a bit more feasible, really, with less travel and stuff?
It could be, and that's some of the conversations I'm having this morning. You know, I mean, back in the day, I used to put festivals on, and we used to put role models on for youths, you know, like hip hop MCs that had done good, and that inspired a load of new hip hop crews from around here. You know, I'm looking at doing projects like that you know, that kind of galvanize the scenes in that way. So yeah, watch that space, definitely.
Awesome. I'll be watching lots of different spaces because you occupy so many of them. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you, Pat. Thank you very much for joining us on One More Thing.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Cool. And thank you to everybody who's watched this. Big up. Thanks for supporting One More Thing, and please like and subscribe this video. Stay tuned. There's plenty more to come. Thank you.
One more thing. One more thing. One more thing.